Bot Brothers.
Welcome to the show. This is the Bot Brothers AI for Educators with Mike Pearson
and Pat Burns.
We're excited to be here. We have a great show for you.
The Bot Brothers.
So a lot's been happening this week, obviously, right? And I think with all the changes going on, it's always kind of fun to think about or to kind of talk about what sort of exciting or kind of mind-blowing thing in AI that you've come across that's really something that you've been wanting to talk about. And so, does anything stand out to you by any chance?
I think the most mind-blowing, exciting thing this week for me was that all of a sudden ChatGPT4 was out. Mm-hmm. I saw it on, I think, some newsletter I get. And I wasn't using it, and I hopped on, and there it was, and all the stuff it promises that it'll do. It's already better. It's already more robust, like scary robust. It's supposed to do, like, you can drop an image in it, and I couldn't get that to work. It is supposed to describe what's going on. Or the example that OpenAI had was there's a picture of like milk and an egg and something else, and it was like, what can I make with these? And it just gave out all these different like possible recipes that you could do. It also, you can dump far more text into it. The responses were better. And that for me was like, GPT-4 is here. Apparently, Pat, Microsoft Bing has been using it already. There was people talking about how they thought that was going on. They suspected that's what was happening because they've invested $10 billion or something into OpenAI. So they kind of get dibs. So that, like, I've been waiting for it to show up. And now it's here, and now I've been playing with it. And what was it? What was it for you? What was the mind-blowing, exciting thing for you?
Well, I mean, in terms of all AI, there are a variety of things that have dropped. I think ChatGPT4 has been great, and I've toyed around with it, trying to kind of get familiar with it. And I've also kind of compared the previous the three version, which doesn't require subscription. All right, so the 4 you have to pay for.
That's true.
Now that whether or not that changes over time, who knows? I suspect. There's so many different AI programs that are trying to go off like a subscription model, which makes a lot of sense. And so I don't think that's necessarily going to go away. But comparing the two has been really fun. And I've popped in same prompts and both just to see what they'll kick out. And to your point, yeah, it does. It kicks out higher quality, definitely more precise. I understand that the precision is kind of a big kind of factor or additive sort of change. So it's not to say that 3 is bad. It's not. It's actually still quite good. But 4 performs at just a high level. And I remember, what blew me away. So it's not necessarily so much new technology per se. It was more looking at how ChatGPT performs. I remember there was a graph that was showing like all these different tests that it run. And you can look this up on OpenAI's site. And the one that just kind of like floored me was it said that ChatGPT4 could perform or basically hit the 99th percentile on a universal basic bar exam. Yeah, right. So for lawyers, and it completely
it was over 90%,
shifted.
Right? Like, what are lawyers going to do?
Right,
now, right. We thought it was educators, but now it's lawyers. And then like the A-push history test was like at that level too. Like anything that's like kind of like remembering stuff. It was nailing it. We will say, is we both teach AP language. Like, it did not do well on that or AP Lit, but we're just waiting.
We're mildly comforting, but
I know, right? It's like, this
like,
AP
we're safe for another
job.
month. But it just, the fact that it can do that is just so remarkable. Now, having said that, I suspect that there are a lot of lawyers or people who are kind of in the know between law and say technology are like, oh shoot, how is this going to impact them? Which makes me think about, that in their realm, much like a lot of other realms, there are all these like worries and fears going on. Go ahead. And
that brings us up to what we want to talk about today, which is like kind of the question we have is that we're calling it AI fear. Why worry and why not? Right. So Pat, on that sense, I think the question is, what fears have you heard? Like we've done all this, presentation and talking to all kinds of people. Like what fears are out there?
I think with regards to educators, and I imagine that they're going to come out in different sort of ways. But it seems to me that when I talk to educators, that the two kind of biggest things seem to center around plagiarism, of course, which has been on everyone's minds.
And totally a fact.
Yeah,
it's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's something that I think we're even still trying to wrap our heads around And then some days I'm just like, we'll figure out, it won't be a problem. And other days I'm like, this is terrible. It just kind of depends. But then the other, so plagiarism on the one hand, and then the other one being just privacy. Now the privacy one, I think there's maybe some legitimate concerns there. However, I don't know if they're as full blown or need to be as full blown as people think. If only because I know that ChatGPT, they've been updating continuously, right? And one of the things that they did is they realized, wait, okay, we recognize privacy is important for people, so we're not going to sell off people's information. We're not really even going to store it. We're going to go ahead and any chats you have after 30 days will just drop off, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that. Yep.
30 days. Now it hasn't been 30 days yet, so we'll see if that follows through. But let's kind of take them at their word for now. And if it does, great. The other thing too, and this is something that people don't talk about too much, and I'm not a big tech guy, so like forgive me for maybe not understanding exactly how this works, but I've heard this actually in a couple different contexts. One of which was I had the privilege of being on a call about AI and education through MIT. It was either MIT or MIT grads had put together like a seminar. It was across the country. It was a webinar basically, and they said, you know what? They said what people don't seem to realize is that ChatGPT is not technically connected to the internet, right? That they've actually kind of got all the information, but it's not actually like live. And so I think to me,
that's why you get that thing. It's like I'm only updated to 2021. I don't go on the internet. But they sucked up everything prior to that.
Right. And so I think so by virtue of that, it's not like your information is able to be taken and used by somebody in some other country, right? Point. So I'm like, that actually makes it safer in that regard. Right. So now
they're not warehousing your stuff that will get hacked into.
Right.
Someone might use whatever information. Yeah. Like I know companies had to worry about that because if you're going to upload your company database of like all your finances or whatever to have it do analysis, you don't want someone getting that.
Right. Now if there's something that I'm misunderstanding, by all means, I'd want our listeners to tell
someone
me.
hit us, right?
But that's my understanding as of right now. So that's actually comforting in a way. Now, of course, there's always issues of say like, that there's like the ChatGPT kind of like policy. And, I think it's set at 18 years of age. And so how do you kind of grapple with that? And I think that's tricky because, on the page, there's one thing, but there's also like, well, how does one regulate that? Is it even enforceable?
Right.
Does ChatGPT ultimately care? Or are they just kind of covering their bases legally, which I would get. But then, then from the school point of view, like you want to make sure the students are okay and protected, which they seem to be through the system. So that's fine. I don't know. I think that's where lawyers would have to use AI to find out what to do. Sorry, being a bit of a smart alecky about that. But you know what I mean? That like, how do you? I don't know. I think that there has to be conversations with parents, with community stakeholders, districts, et cetera, teachers to say, hey, like, what would be the most responsible thing for us to do? But I think we can figure that out. I think that's manageable. The plagiarism thing. That's a whole nother sort of nut to crack. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I do, actually. So we've done these presentations in front of like predominantly English teachers as we teach English, but some other teachers as well. We did a cross-district one. We did one at a conference, and we've talked to loads of teachers. And in our presentation to some of our teacher friends, Pat and I had built this presentation, and we'd done some like kind of quasi research where we polled a bunch of our students in our high school and asked them, to what extent are you using ChatGPT or AI programs and what do you do with them? And like half of them are using it. And then one of the questions was, what constant, like, have you used AI to do an entire assignment? And it came out to be about 5%. And we only polled like 400. But then Pat had shown me a Stanford, from the end of last year, Stanford did kind of a similar thing. And their students said about 5% had admitted to like using it to do an entire project. So we kind of heard that and we were like, in our presentation, we brought that up and some people were like, well, what about plagiarism? We just kind of said, well, it's only 5%. But then a friend of ours approached me and said, you guys are way past like kind of like even it's so deep and you've been thinking about this. But for me, that's just hearing this, the plagiarism is really on my mind. And she made me pause because I realized that I kind of moved beyond that. But when I thought back, the first thing that was on my mind with all this AI stuff is I was like, kids are just going to have the program write stuff for them. And I was super worried and it's still a concern and it's a totally legitimate concern.
Well, and that really kind of sounds to me that that idea of validating where people are at with it. I think that, you explained previously, that when you first heard out about it, you were thinking, "Oh my God, there goes my pension, my job, everything else."
Totally, yeah.
And for me, I guess I didn't quite have that reaction exactly, but I've felt, or I've thought that.
Feel
At least,
threatened.
yeah, and
you
you
feel threatened because it's your core identity, right? And even today, you showed me some AI system that graded stuff or something, and I had the thought of, what's my role?
Right.
And so it's like, it's my identity. And so I kind of yo-yo. I'm like, this is great. And then I'll have like a moment where I'm like kind of panicked.
Right. But I think that's where like I might be a little more concerned with people who either are so terrified and don't see the positive, or only see the positive and don't recognize the possible problems with it. Because those people are looking at such extremes that they're not realizing this. We need to learn to develop, to have nuanced conversations about it, because it's a mixed bag, right?
And even the open AI guys said that like AI is either going to be great or it's going to be our destruction. So there's even that stuff, and maybe that's just for media, but like it's a nice segue, Pat. I think. So there is some fears out there, but so like so yeah, there's reasons to worry about it, but what are some reasons to not worry about it? Like, what is the good?
Well, I think there was a lot of good with it. I guess if I may, I was thinking about, I guess I'm thinking about all my worries now. I'm kind of stuck on that. I think that's part of the issue. I want to maybe bring this point up for a second. The emotional sort of kind of like weight of it. It can be so pronounced for some people that like we have to allow people to kind of the space to kind of go through that. And to know that it might kind of ebb and flow a little bit, but also to not let that deter us from saying, okay, what are the benefits? And do the benefits outweigh the negatives? And, I don't know if there's an answer to that. I think that's part of the problem is we like answers. We want answers. We want things to be cut and dry, clear, black and white. And it's just not going to happen. I think that there's some honesty with acknowledging that. I think there's some honesty with realizing that the world is never actually black and white. As much as we try to make it that way, it just isn't. And I think there's it's going to require, I think, just really mature adult conversations, which is maybe asking a lot these days.
Let me ask you something more personally.
Yeah, go ahead.
How did you go from fear to excitement?
Oh Lord.
Or are you there?
I'm at the level. I lean definitely more towards the excitement, simply because I've been playing with it. Yeah, I've been experimenting with it. Right. Okay. Right. Which is to say that like I'm trying to find out ways in which I think it's actually useful for me. I guess I think of it as one ought to, which is that it is a tool, right? That like you could take any tool out there and use it for nefarious reasons, I suppose. Right. But I think the vast majority of people will use it in ways that they're trying to kind of better their situation. And hopefully, not even hopefully, I think generally speaking, people are using it pretty ethically. Are there going to be people who don't? Yeah. Are there going to be good people who misuse it at times? For sure, right? But think about we deal with teenagers all the time. That they're in one class I could have like 5 kids lie to me about why they didn't turn their homework in. Yeah. Right. That's never changed. Right. Like that's just people. Right. So
you're kind of normalizing it. Is that what I'm hearing? Like people are people, and there's going to be some of this. And,
I guess normal. I guess, or just recognizing that it's normal. Right. That like there's always going to be some new technology.
Rifters,
people are going to freak about. Yeah, that's just humanity. Now, do I like it? No, but but if I recognize, okay, it's just the next iteration. Now, having said that, the capabilities and the speed at which people can do things in nefarious ways is amplified. But then again, maybe so is the way that we kind of just conduct our normal lives can be improved. Yeah, and so when I started playing with it, I'm like, all I can really ultimately do, I can't control the world, but I can control my relationship to it. Right. And so I think when I started kind of playing with it, trying to figure out, okay, in my domain, in my little small, corner of the world here, how is it that can help me out? And I'm thinking, oh man, it can help me with generate discussion questions and like lesson planning and thinking through like cool combinations for units and across text, and help me come up with new text ideas, and helping students do that too. And putting and giving students more ownership and voice in developing like their own learning, which I think is awesome. And not to speak of like the way, if we can find a way to like kind of integrate, AI into our grading so that it's just quicker. Right. As an English teacher, like it's the thing that I loathe the most, and that's never going to change, which is the grading.
I love and loathe it. Like I'm always like loath to start grading an essay, but then like when you get a really good one and like you really get to see in the kid's head, like I'm like, and that's probably true for you as well, right? Like you get the good pieces and.
Yeah, I think what's tough with our level is that there are definitely going to be students that you're like, oh dang, that was really great.
Right.
And this is not a knock on high school students at all, but I think it's also true that there's a lot of students that are just trying to kind of find their voice.
Yeah.
And you're reading it, you're like, it ain't Hemingway,
or
but it's okay.
Or they're just really interested in some other area and just not English class.
Yeah, right.
Which is
right.
fine.
It's totally fine.
Right. You don't have to be amazing. You just have to learn some stuff.
Exactly. So I don't know. I think I look for the positives. The negatives, I don't have to go looking for them. The two big ones I already mentioned. There are some really kind of clever, interesting things that people are doing with AI that are really kind of like, whoa, that's not great. Go ahead.
I thought you said something really interesting and important. Like if out there, if you're listening, if you're just kind of just terrified, like where I was in November of AI and ChatGPT, Pat just said I started playing around with it, and we would urge you to go play with the AI stuff that's out there. Because once you start playing around with it and seeing how it operates, I think it's hard not to get excited because it's just so freakish and amazing. Just like searching something that like a good recipe or something that comes back so fast. But then playing with it as a teaching tool, I think that just kind of gets you kind of over the hurdle. And there's still the plagiarism, there's still the cheating thing, that is going to be in the back of your head. But for me, what I started thinking about is like, I've been teaching long enough that I remember when Google came in, right? And kind of the platform shift there, where we used to go to the library and get books to do research, like all of a sudden everything was on Google. And then you had to teach kids how to use Google with like Boolean operators. And I remember specifically having to show a class, like they were searching, and when I pulled up like Martin Luther King Jr., the third link that Google provided was from a white supremacist group. And kids had clicked on it when they're like, did you know that Martin Luther King said all this terrible stuff? And I go, where are you getting this information? And we searched it and we opened it up, and that was before, the way that Google indexed stuff, you would get information like that. It's not true anymore, but it took them a while. So like, I kind of think about like how I teach kids how to vet information on Google. And I'm realizing that this is a tool that goes out and gets answers that may be good or not. I have to show them how to use it.
Which is, I don't think any different. I don't think that changes our role or is different from anything we've done before. Which is to say that like
right.
it's the new tool. We have to teach them how to use it and to use it responsibly, right? So if you're doing research papers, to your point, how do you find sources that are legit and credible? That doesn't change. How do you look at ChatGPT's output and say, oh, this point here is legitimate, but this other one down here is nonsense, right? So I remember there was that one situation where I tried to see if it could write an essay a couple months back, and I asked it to quote the Gatsby, and it gave me that quote from the Necromancer. I'm like, what the heck is this? It literally says something about television. I'm like, that's not a thing. I'm like, TVs didn't exist during Gatsby's day, so I caught it right away, right?
That speaks to that. To use this, you have to have someone who knows what they're talking about read the output.
Right.
To know if it's good or not. Like a teacher told me a story of her brother who's at a university in Colorado, and the class is like, we need a study guide. And the teacher just ChatGPT and looked at it and said, this is correct, and handed it out. Right. So he didn't have to create, or she didn't have to create, or they didn't have to create, the study guide. It was done for them. And all they had to do is go, this is accurate. It's almost like you have instant textbooks available.
Well, which kind of actually begs an interesting, not necessarily an interesting question, maybe it's just a statement that I'm thinking about how that English teachers, much like say social studies teachers, are very much really into it. What we're trying to do is develop cultural literacy. This idea of like, well, do you understand the culture? Do you understand how it works? Do you understand how
the AI is writing the literature?
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, cultural literacy, like, so you're saying the literature of the culture, but I was thinking like actual like output of literature, like ChatGPT creates text, creates literature, quote unquote.
It can do that. I guess what I was saying though is in terms of like
in general.
What I'm saying is that in terms of like the example you just gave, right, where you said somebody was out in Colorado, right, and they're the teachers like looking at the information, looking at the output, and they're saying, oh, that's valid, right? What I'm saying is that like and then in my case with the Gatsby a quote example, like that I have enough cultural literacy, I've read enough, I've seen enough, I've experienced enough to know, what this information that is spitting back out to us, that's actually a thing, or that's not a thing. Right. and so that we're almost kind of like, I guess, cultural curators, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
And so we have to have, that doesn't stop us for, like, our job is maybe that much more important in that we have to make sure that the algorithms don't kick out,
Bad
garbage,
information, disinformation,
but think about how much
fakes.
Yeah,
Sure.
but think about how much disinformation is out there now. Does it amplify it and give the potential for bad actors to make it worse? Oh, absolutely.
Right. And maybe that's our shift. Maybe that's the shift in our jobs is that, okay, we have to deal with information,
Right.
which is way different than teaching a great novel.
Right.
Right. But it is like, if this thing is the writer of our quote unquote writer of our times, then we have to learn to deal with its output.
Right. But that would mean too, though, that like when they're doing research or even just, writing a normal paper, whatever, that the credibility is that much more maybe of a focus. Like it's always important, but now maybe we have to be a little bit more vigilant about it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I just kind of was thinking about this. It's like, so we're trying to talk about like the fear and why you should worry and why you shouldn't worry. And I was thinking about, like, I think for some people out there, like there was the pandemic, which was crushing, right? And then getting school up and going, and then student behavior, if you know in the classroom, was not quite right. And it feels like we've just been, it's been chaos, and we're fixing, and we just get going, and all of a sudden, like, ChatGPT and AI comes out, and we have to rethink our jobs again.
Yeah.
And I think that's a piece that people are just like, I just need a break.
Right.
Give me a break. And I was there too. And I think probably if you're listening to this, you might be like, I have to learn another thing. I have to learn how to like do Google all over again. Like that's it's super obnoxious, right?
If I could jump in, there are three things that come to mind. One, what you're speaking to is just something that's been on my mind more and more over the past, I say, month and a half or so. And I think it's worth looking into. So anybody who's interested, maybe like look it up, but there's a concept called cognitive load. Right, and that's essentially
you have talked about this.
Yeah, it's this idea of there's so many different sort of kind of things that we can do in any given day, all the tasks, and teachers have an enormous amount of cognitive load because we're constantly like multitasking and trying to manage a classroom and keep things going, and and we're checking.
It is a stressful job.
It's very stressful, and it's nonstop for however many hours in the day that you're doing it. So there's an enormous amount of cognitive load, just kind of like heavy lifting that we're doing just on a mental level, a cerebral level, to kind of keep things functioning.
Without even the emotional stuff.
Right. Well, but that's part of it too, though, right? But yeah. So, and I think that to your point, that coming out of the pandemic, it seems like, oh damn, here's another thing. It's like, yeah, for sure. However, and this is where I think back to your question about like, how did I kind of like start to maybe embrace ChatGPT and AI stuff? I actually started to get really excited because I realized it could save me all this time and became more efficient. I'm like, well, shoot, I can take this cognitive load off. And so I'm not carrying so much. Like we have families, we've got, some of us coach, some of us are sponsors, some of us just want to have lives on our own outside of work, or sometimes we just want to get a drink or whatever the case may be.
Do you remember what you said?
I don't remember anything.
I remember you said we got ChatGPT to like do a quick lesson, and you're like, oh, great, I can have a beer tonight.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right.
Like literally that was your fun moment. It's like, oh my gosh, well, I just got an hour of my life back.
Yeah, it just and that stress that the cognitive load gives you, it can kind of just come off your shoulders a little bit. And so so where I get excited, I know that the technology is there for grading certain things, like was it Go Formative has
Yeah, well,
you're more familiar with than I.
My wife just said that a teacher friend told her that Go Formative now is going to it will create test questions for you based on the stuff you put in there, right? And we know how hard it is to write a good test question, but OpenAI has fed it like a billion, zillion, quadruple, or in the words of my 5-year-old's, infinity plus test questions, right? So it's gonna come up with some ones that are pretty good that you can probably tweak, and that's a time saver.
Yeah, and I think in our realm, I mean, obviously,
and then you could just drop it and Go Formative and auto grades.
Right.
So
exactly.
Sweet.
Yeah. Right. Which is awesome.
That's awesome.
But I think it does what it does do too. That I think it's worth maybe a conversation for another time. But it really shifts our understanding of like, well, what is the job that we're doing then? Like, what is our role? What are our roles? Because grading has always been such a big staple of it. I think my argument is like the grading itself doesn't necessarily have to go away. I mean, you're saying that AI can do it for you, and that's true. Maybe you use it in doses. Maybe you use it, maybe you use it as like I would love to see a program that can grade an essay and give feedback. And I think ChatGPT can actually have some of that capability to some extent.
Yeah,
but
we've kind of learned how to program it. Yeah.
But having said that, like it's not that because I think something is lost by just simply giving it over to the AI and just saying, well, just grade it. Because you miss an opportunity to kind of make a connection with the student. And that's something, but the flip side is then if you're not bogged down with all the grading, you can actually maybe have more time to actually get to know them, in a different sort of way.
If it's accurate, maybe you have it for one assignment, like you do multiple writing assignments, like it cuts the load. It's like a co-teacher, right? Like it does 15 of your 30 essays and you read 15 and next time you flip-flop. Right.
Okay. Right.
So then you get a sense of your kids.
Right.
Right. Or they can initiate. They can say, do you want the program to grade it or do you want me to look at it? Right.
Right.
I mean, who knows? And it's probably a conversation for a different. Podcast,
well, yeah, because the technology isn't really quite entirely there, but I think it's worth thinking about because it's one of those things that people are trying to figure out. Right. Which is to say that all this technology is coming out. It's happened very, very fast. There are all these companies that are popping up. I mean, it's literally people are calling it a gold rush. It's a kind of a tech AI gold rush right now. And so we have to understand that some of these programs are, if they aren't already built and just haven't been rolled out, right? So like you mentioned ChatGPT and trying to play with the image thing, like you can't do it yet because it's functionally possible, but it's not open to the masses yet, right? That they've selected.
I was not selected. It hurts me.
You're important. You're important. You're loved. I promise. Just not by them yet.
Just not by chat.
Yeah. So, but it'll eventually come out, right? Like Google has Bard, and they've been really kind of like careful about when they want to roll that out, but it's coming. And so, I think that's where
some people are getting to use Bard.
Well, and I think again, coming back to this original topic of our worries and fears, but also the benefits. Like we have to start being aware that this stuff is out there because it's coming, whether we like it or not. And so, rather than try to hunker down into some sort of kind of, hole, right, which is just not a feasible thing, or it's not realistic, it's not practical. We have to figure out, okay, how do we kind of ride this wave, right? Because it's coming, right? Or if it's not already here, right?
Yeah.
And it's gonna be something that we have to, educate each other on, right? And talk about
trying to do, right?
And,
right now.
Well, right. That's a bit on the nose.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point of the show, right? It's like we're trying to help people, like what we've learned, like help you and figure it out.
Well, and let us know too. I mean, listeners. I mean, when you're hearing stuff, like let us know like what topics you want to hear. What do you think would be helpful?
Yeah, drop us a line.
It'd be great.
On the podcast, there's a link for our Twitter. There's a Google form. So go ahead and drop us a line. So I guess Pat, where we started out was AI fear, why worry and why not? And it seems to me like, we shouldn't worry because we do have this tool, and the more you use the tool and get used to it, the more use you find out of it, and it kind of brings down the sense of, whatever, I don't want to say anxieties, but that's what I felt, whatever fears you have. And then just keep on playing with it and maybe look at your policies and start considering those. Is there anything you want to add, like why you shouldn't worry?
No, I think that having some sense of awareness of like what the capabilities are, what the negatives can be, or if not already have been in certain cases, because there's news stories you can find that show the negative sides. That's valuable. I'm not saying don't look at that, but you have to temper it with the positives. And to your point, like when you start playing with it, I think what you're getting at is you're starting to kind of make the unknown known. And once you do that, once you kind of actually see the land that you're standing in, once you actually give light to what it is that you're talking about, once you actually put a name to things, they're less scary. Then you're like, oh, okay, I can maybe, because I think what happens is what's happening is people's sense of control is so blown out of the water that we need to have students, or not students, but students, I suppose, and teachers try to regain some sense of control so we can function, right? And so to your point or your question about like, why we shouldn't worry so much. Yeah, I don't think we have to worry as much as we need to, but, acknowledge those fears, but then also realize, okay, there's another side to look at this too. And some of it's amazing.
All right,
and just mind-boggling.
I think we've got it. I think Pat just gave it to us. Why worry and why not? Here's why you shouldn't worry and what you have to do. You have to make the unknown known and see your landscape, and then you'll know what to do.
Bot Brothers.
The
Bot Brothers.
This is Mike.
This is Pat. We are the Bot Brothers, AI for educators.
Have a good day.
Bot Brothers.
The Bot
If you enjoyed this episode or learned something, please share this podcast with your friends or on social media. If you would like to be part of the conversation, or if you'd like to see some resources, there is information linked in the show notes. We would also appreciate if you click the follow button and give us a rating. It helps us help you. Until the next time, this is Mike from the Bot Brothers, AI for Educators.